Okay, part 2. Went out to the vehicle because I didn't have access to it earlier. They took this switch out. The switch is testing fine on the bench with the meter. This is the ix35 Hyundai. It's a newish vehicle. The switch is testing fine, however the rear windows, both of them, will go down quite quickly. As soon as you go to pull up, you're not getting any voltage out of this end. It's like 0.75 of a volt to 3 volts positive. I've tested with basically a short circuit. I put this in the meter and amp mode in the 20 amps, put it on to 20 amps DC, shorted out the positive with this lead. That's unscrewed itself slightly, and put the negative onto the wire on the vehicle. So I shorted between the positive, which is the outside, and on the actual connector, this is the third pin along, so it was that positive to that pin there, and I shorted out the negative, which is that one and that one, if I remember correctly. I'll have to take it apart again to remember. Which sent negative there, positive there, the window went up. Same on the other side, sent that positive across to there and water across to there, and the window went up again. It was using about 10 amps. The back window switches worked fine, so there wasn't a problem with the motor. It's not shorting out at the back end. Both sides are doing the same thing. So the only thing I can assume, as you can see, this is a little bit sticky at the back. I haven't cleaned it yet. I was going to clean it after I tested it. The only thing I can assume is that some liquid has got inside here and got inside the switches and is screwing them up basically. So we're not getting a good connection. Therefore, what we're going to have to do is switch that back over to volts, otherwise you blow your meter up. Take it all apart again, desolder the chips, the switches, and clean them up. There's my little pot gone. Just spilled my cup of tea all over the floor, which is great. There's my little pot there. It's just a measuring jug that cracks across the bottom in the dishwasher, even though it says dishwasher safe. Excellent. So, save time, I'm just going to pop the board out itself, because I'm not going to need to take all the switches apart, because I know they're okay, and I can clean those in the sink if need be. Oh, I do need to take that switch off, which is going to require me to take it off. Okay. No, don't pop back in. I know they have a special place there to pop them out, but hey. Go on, out you get. It's always the last one that's a bit awkward. Right, get rid of that. That's just the switch for the electric windows, which works absolutely fine. Electric wing mirrors. Pop this off again. My little pot. Circuit board out. So I'm going to have to desolder these two switches and basically take them apart if I can. As far as I can see there, it's connected with a little tiny little pin there and two little ones there. So apologies about the light. I normally have a white sort of high vis light, but yeah, that's vanished somewhere. So I should be able to just pop that and that and that and that, and the same on the other side. There's a single one should pop off. and that should give me access to the inside of the switch, but obviously I've got to desolder all of this first. I'm going to have to lift those pins up to desolder it. Just move the camera a little bit so it's closer to me, because it's anything else working there. 2 seconds. Right, that's a bit better. Right, that's more like it. So now I can see and the phone can see. I'm using my phone at the moment. So, power lead. It's all tangled up as per usual. Pause my video. Right, apologies for that. I left all my solder etc. out on the other side. 2 seconds. Apologies for those 2 little jumps. While I was out, I got my cotton buds, which I use normal ones nowadays. Just normal earbuds. I also picked up my magnetic helping hands, which are tangled up with my laptop power supply. Come on, there you go. You're doing it. So this should, in theory, fit underneath here. If not, I'll have to jack you up a little bit more. Just this, important. Right, that's a bit better height. Yeah. So, got my screwdrivers and everything as well while I was getting out of the car. You know, disaster time. Everything seemed to want to go wrong today when I was getting out of the vehicle. Right. So, I don't need that and I don't need that. I just need the switches, which I appear to have lost. There they are. Move these around. Apologies for the banging noise. Don't need those 2 long ones. I'll put them aside. Not as magnetic as they were. Okay, I'm just going to stick these spikes through these holes to sort of support it. There's my thick solder, which I'll just use for desoldering. And what I'll do is I'll put these in 2 positions so that I can grab hold of the board. Okay, maybe it's not. Might need to use all of these. The one downside about this helping hands, these are quite stiff, so if you want to hold onto the circuit board, it's sort of a little bit too long. I'll get there, always do. I have to make sure I don't turn the hot air on because that is currently not in the stand. I'll probably need it later anyway. Right, I'll grab a hold of that part. Might move that around a little bit more, straighten it up, and move that to the back. There. Trying to get this as stable as I possibly can so that while I'm desoldering, it's off the deck and I can pull on the switch underneath. So this might be a bit advanced for some people. Most people wouldn't take a switch apart and fix it like this, but in the car industry, it costs a lot of money for one of these window switches, so you don't really want to be spending a fortune. Let's zoom into the default there. So my soldering iron gear is, I'll show you, a bit mucky because I've been working on lots of surface mount stuff, and it's got a bit dusty as well while it's been sitting still. So I have a small microscope, which I do use, and then a heat bed, and I've also got the hot air station, preheat plate, and the soldering iron, which is on this side. I've got a fine tip on my soldering iron which needs to get clean, but I'll clean it in there. And that also fits my microscope, fits in there as well. It has quite a large gap in the microscope. So that is my setup. I do also have another station made by Web. I buy the Web gear because it's cheap and it works. I've got one station which has a built-in 20 amp 50 volt power supply. I think it's 20 amp, 10 amp. So it's got a variable voltage power supply on it. Anything from 0 to 50 volts. Very, very handy for doing circuit tests. You can limit the ampage, so you can do it for iPhones, etc. You can test where the short is on the capacitor by injecting power into the board. Very, very handy. The other station that I've got is just a soldering iron, which is my portable one, and then I have another station which is soldering iron heat, just on its own, which I don't use very often. So just check that's tight, because that's always slams off. I do want to have one of the new soldering irons, which is they're heated at the tip, so you end up with a lot better heat transfer. It's so much better. But I haven't bought one yet. I've been watching a lot of reviews on them and they look absolutely brilliant, but it's not something that I can justify buying at the moment. These soldering irons work absolutely fine. It just takes a little while for something like that, which is a ground plane, to accept the heat. It doesn't really affect you a massive amount in day-to-day running, unless you're working on something with a massive ground plane, and even then you just crank the temperature up to 450 or 500 and let it absorb that heat as soon as you touch the board. I'll probably be using my heat gun for this, just to heat up this solder once I've desoldered it with as much as I can. Using my wick, I use desoldering wick. Yeah, these switches are testing absolutely fine. They're passing power. They're just not passing enough power. And ampage is quite often caused by a dirty contact and can screw you up all sorts of ways. While I'm in here, I'm also going to resolder or touch up and top up the vias that go through the board, so like these vias, to make sure that there's not a bad connection between the two vias. This one I could do with that off. Put it out there. It's just in the way. I'll do the same with that side as well. It's still stable enough. I mean, it could be that a via's failed, but I can't see why that would fail on both sides. As I say, test the switch with a piece of sort of, I actually used solid core copper cable, just to bridge it across, and test, works fine, no problems whatsoever. I could actually probably do with my wedge tip for this, to be fair, which was in this box, I think. I've got the short tip on there, that's different. No, it's not. Right, I'll just use this tip. Right, desoldering blade and snips. Where have my snips gone? Where have my snips gone? And I think they've gone to walkies in the box. Oh, I've got these snips. These are rusty snips which I use for outdoor work. I'll just trim that end off. These are just used when I'm doing like garden stuff because they're a little bit rusty, but they're still good. Right. The solder blade. Again, apologies for that. Right. Once I've desoldered these, it's going to be a nightmare. Again, heat transfer. It's the most important thing. You've got to get the heat onto the board and onto the wick to do this properly. And when you've got a thin bit like I've got on here, because the last thing I was doing was surface mount stuff. I do have thinner ones than this, but this is about average. It does thicker and thinner. The end cools down so quick you just can't transfer heat. You can't transfer the heat into the board, so it makes it awkward for desoldering. You get the solder hot and then sort of try and pull the wick through, really try and get it absorbed into the wick, and then move on to a fresh bit of wick. And the longer the end on the wick, the harder it is to heat the wick up to take all of the solder out. You see it's got stuck there. Right. Now I've desoldered them as much as I can. I'm going to see if I can straighten out the pin, the leg. Just heat it up a little bit. Ow. Soldering iron is hot, as can be shown by my melted finger. Happens all the time. Boy, these are strong legs. Right, I'll have a look at that in a minute. I might have to use some, find me proper snips. Looks a bit messy at the moment, but that's okay. Just going to clean that little bit up there, because just a little bit. Come on, suck it up. No, he's not. Turn the temperature of the soldering iron up. Let's turn it up 20 degrees to 400 odd degrees. 406 I think it's on at the moment. Yep, it's got there straight away. These soldering irons heat up actually really quickly for a cheap soldering iron. That's basically a heating element with a piece of metal stuck to the end of it. I do much prefer solder wick to the desoldering pumps. I find the desoldering pumps you end up with hunks of solder inside it, and quite often you're in a hurry trying to desolder and you'll pump it and drop all of the solder that you just desoldered all over the board, and then you've got to sit and clean it all off because it's still hot and it sticks. Right, they've both desoldered quite well. Just not so happy with that one. I'll try this one next. This actual process here could actually end up cleaning up the contact as the contacts heat up. Just quickly wick that onto there. Oops, stick. So you can see I'm using a thicker part of the iron. The thickest part that hasn't got coating on it, just to transfer as much heat as possible. because the actual tip will cool down really quickly because it's so thin. I don't think I'm going to be able to speed this up, I'm afraid, so you might want to fast forward wind while I suck all the solder up. It is up to you. But I'm not putting this through a video editor, I'm literally just bunging it from my phone onto my account. Starting to suck the heat out again. Snippy snip. I buy this tech spray stuff because it's good quality. I've been on eBay, I've bought desoldering wick from eBay, and it was shite. It was rubbish. It literally didn't suck up any solder. I even tried soldering to it and there was that much sort of rubbish in it. It wouldn't even take solder. I put flux on it, extra flux, no joy. And I mean, it wasn't cheap, I paid £7 for a medium sized wheel. It wasn't as big as this one, but I'd rather buy this stuff, which would only cost me about, I think, about £3 or £4 more. And this stuff has lasted me, what, 2 years? I haven't done a lot of desoldering, to be fair. And I did lose it for 6 months. I put it in one of my toolboxes and then forgot about it. Forgot where I'd put it. Which really did annoy me because I had to desolder everything by blowing on it, which is another method you use. Basically heat the solder up and blow it off the board. It doesn't work very well, and it quite often blows the component off the board as well, and then you're searching for that. Right, I think they're as clean as I'm going to get them. So I need to lift these pins up, and they're quite a thick pin. So I'll use the thin ones. Yeah, they're the thick duck pliers. I'll try and use these as the thick duck pliers, as I call them. Get them that way around. I just use them to straighten pins out sometimes, if I can. They folded the pins over on these on purpose to make sure that you can't lift them up. No, that's not going to work. Try a screwdriver. So I actually told the garage this might be a pain in the arse. We might not be able to repair this. We should, but we might not because the switches are a pain in the arse to take apart. Mainly because of these pins, and the actual switch itself has got such tiny little connectors on it in the plastic. So as I'm lifting this up, you can see it's separating from the solder, so that's good. That one might have a little bit more solder on it. Try not to damage the actual contact surface if I can help it. Right. Excuse the noise for the hot air station, which I've stupidly wrapped around the back of the mains cable. Come here. Soldering iron out of the way so I can get this to cool. Switch that on. Set the temperature at 400 degrees. And then I'll use these pliers to just try and ease off the switch. Right, we're at 400 degrees now. I'll tell you what I'll do. I do have flux in a needle, but that's not always available. So I have this flux paste, which is it's plumber's flux, works just as well. Just Just put a little bit on the board. It's not like self-cleaning, residue-free stuff. It just sort of sticks to everything. So I'll stick this on the pins. It'll help it desolder. I'm going to be cleaning them anyway, so just need a tiny little bit. And try not to leave too much of the there you go. It's actually melted onto the board a little bit. Let's try that. Flat pliers. I'm half doubting that this is the problem. And the reason why I'm half doubting it is because for both back windows to be doing the same thing from the front, just cool it down a little bit. Okay, that's that side out. Try not to hit the circuit board up too much either, because those vias that I go through will separate if you do this. If you heat it up too much. Come on, switch, down you come. Starting to heat up a little bit too much on one side. I appear to be stuck on that pin. The other pins are off. Let's see. There you go. Right. So that's the bottom of the switch. It hasn't been damaged. It's a little bit warm. It's got a bit of flux on it. It hasn't been damaged. You can actually see the contacts on the inside of that. So put that to the left hand side, because that's the left on the board. Get that little ball of solder off as well, because that will mess us up later. And then we'll start on the other one. Just stop. It's just a little bit too much solder on there for my liking. There we go, that's that side off. Going to be a problem on both switches. Oh, there we go. It's off. Just pull it out the hole. So that is the positive one. That's why that's such a problem. It obviously connects to both these contacts in here. We'll let these cool down before I go and take them apart, because this is very hot. I'll put that one on the right. I don't think they're going to be sided, but it's worthwhile still keeping them separate. Just for your brain, so you know if something's wrong and you go back on and it turns out they are sided, then you bug it, aren't you? So I'd rather make sure. Quick desolder. Try and get that in the hole. I need to add some solder to that. Clean the board up a bit. Again, there's vias underneath here, so it could even be these vias didn't have enough solder in. You don't know. So cleaning them up is always worthwhile, and then re-tinning them, re-soldering them. This is going to be a longer video, I'm afraid. Come on, off you get. There you go. I'm cleaning the vias out so there's no solder left in them either. Just use a little bit of this solder and top that up, because that one is not sucking up. And there's that one. Just quickly top that via up, clean the tip, top that via up. I just like them clean before I go working away on them. So best way to do that sometimes is to put a little bit more on, and that way the solder is touching the desoldering braid. And if it's touching this, it'll keep on wicking in. So we'll go through like that, and I'll just pull it back, snip that off, start a bit further along, bit of heat, get it to start sucking in, see it travelling along it, and just give it a little drag. It should pick all of that solder up out of the hole. Occasionally it doesn't. Another thing I like about this sharp tip, to be fair, if all the solder doesn't come out, you can actually stick it down the hole and it pokes the solder out the top, which helps to desolder it. And just give it a clean across the top. Just check that's clean. Yeah, this one pretty much already was. Just check that's clean. Yeah. And the soldering iron tip, give us a quick snip. Again, this is sort of the pain in the arse side of doing these jobs, because how do you charge for this? It's going to be an expensive job if I did it for like £40 an hour, which you can't do it for, but that's how much a garage charges for doing, you know, a service. If you charge that for your electronics, chances are you'd never make any money. This is probably going to have taken me by the end of it maybe 4 hours, including going there, picking it up, desoldering it like this, cleaning it up. You know, it would be cheaper to buy a new board. Well, not a new one, but a second-hand one. You see how easily that 400 degrees, that extra little bit, actually helps to transfer the heat very, very quickly. You just have to make sure you're not on the board for too long, because if you're on the board for too long, it'll burn the copper off the board at 450 certainly. So I'm trying my best to keep it to a minimum. Just use the old bit to get rid of any of that excess. Right, we're at 406 at the moment, and it's not going through there. That's because that's part of the main ground plane, so it's sucking the heat away from the soldering iron tip. So there is a way around that, a way to do it. This one should go straight in, yeah. There's two ways actually. One way to heat the board up around it. Actually, it's going to be the heat on the bottom. We'll just warm the board up. This is what the preheat thing's for. It makes life so much easier, especially graphic cards and stuff like that, replacing the memory on them. You preheat the board. Oh my jeez. You can just desolder chips in seconds. instead of taking you ages. So it's just a bit warmer, and there it goes. There's that extra little bit of heat. Means the board's already warm. You don't have to wait for the whole heatsink to heat up, and the board and everything else. Makes